people incorporating alternative local knowledge. So if we're going to make a map of a community, it's got to be produced by the local people. It's not a top-down organised structure like a national mapping agency which is collecting authoritative data. It's collecting information from the public and they're participating to create information. So we go to a place called Tindale. This is in Salaam. It has about 100,000 people living in it and it's about 2 square kilometres, give or take, wide. Now, there's not a lot on it. It's just a few roads. But it's thriving. In the same way of Tindale's presentation yesterday about looking at places in India, this is actually quite a thriving district. And over a month, we went in, we mapped everything. You know, and we did it by taking 25 community members from women's groups and organisers, and then looking at the university students and aimed at building GIS skills at a local university. So at the School of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Adi, they've never really worked with real data before. Now when they graduate, they're going to be going off into Tanzania and elsewhere in East Africa, and they will be saying, right, I'm now in charge of an urban planning department for this city of say 100, 200,000 people. And they've never worked with real data before. So this was an opportunity, right, let's collect some data. Now in here we have 93 toilets for 100,000 people, which means you have a lot of open defecation areas, which are basically here and here. Now these are where the natural water sources are, so quite a lot of your sanitation is going back into the water you're drinking. This is clearly an issue in terms of fresh drinking water. They don't really sell much Evian there. Also, you've got places of worship that were mapped, but also informal economies. So where grey represents the land use of residential, you also have quite a lot of commercial areas where you've just got normal shops, and for those of you that have been to Tanzania before, the chips my eye, which is a very nice chip omelette, just because there's not enough carbs alone. So it's really good, and it's a really thriving experience. Myself, I went back to my hometown the other day in Melton Mowbray, and it's dying. A lot of shops have closed down, a lot of industries left. Whereas you go to a place that's a slum, and it's seen as it's quite stigmatic, and it's thriving, but in a different way. So we need to understand that a bit more. And part of the way of how this was operationalised, we spoke with the local government. We got them on side at day one. So as opposed to just using the cartography you get with OpenStreetMap, there was a collaboration and saying, well, can we create maps that are useful to you? So instead of keeping it in OpenStreetMap, because yes, it's a free and open map of the world that everyone can use, but that sort of implies that you have a computer and an internet connection to access it, which you can't take that as a predicate in these places. You need to print things out, you need to give it to people. And this was quite a weird thing, that this guy in the middle is the local government officer for Tindale. He's never seen a map of the place that he's been told by the government, you're now in charge of this area, and he's gone, okay, great. No idea what this looks like. I know the physical boundaries, because a lot of it is by physical demarcation. You have rivers, you have roads, and that's what separates it. And then, sort of going back into the land use, we've actually got a very important area here, and that's Tindale Market. Now that is where all of the fruit and veg for Dar es Salaam goes through. So 3.5 million people, give or take, that's their main transit point for food. Now this was actually quite critical in January 2012 because there was massive floods in Dar and this market got taken out, so they lost their grain stores. Now we can figure out where things are, we can figure out how to plan better resilience. So we'd gone out, we'd collected this data, but then we thought, well, is it any good? Now there's quite a lot of work. Mookie has actually been leading this charge, with completeness, positional accuracy, and there was only one that was really looking in almost a developing nation context, and that was Thomas Koukletos. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right.
Koukletos.
Koukletos, thank you. And that was looking at Haiti, specifically the Haiti earthquake. Now, Haiti got quite levelled, and there was a lot of work that was going on there. So OpenStreetMap, Google Map Maker, and there were a lot of data sets going around. So you're able to use the Go Compare. Now I am quite aware of a very tall shouty man standing at the front saying go compare, but we can let that one slide just a little bit there. But actually, if you look at the countries where we're analysing this data, we're not looking at a developing nation context. Actually, we're looking at a country that doesn't have a national mapping agency. So, authoritative data. So what does this actually mean? And when we went and spoke to the City Council, they went, okay, we've got this data, have some data, and we can do some analysis. So like a dutiful PhD student, I went off, looked at the algorithm, typed it out, and created a nice new map of completeness. But actually, the data they gave me was from 2005, and the data I had was pretty much from 2012. So the temporal accuracy was, that was completely gone. And actually, they weren't ever going to update that data. They just went, right, we're going to pay someone, come in, give us the data, we've got a map, that's what we needed. We don't know how to update it, but we've got a vague idea of what's going on, so we'll go with that. So it sort of led me to one of the big questions of my PhD, is like, how do you measure quality when you don't have a comparative data set? So you want your data to be pretty good, because you don't want to be collecting stuff for it to have no use. Otherwise, you're just making a map for the sake of it. And because there's a lot of slum mapping projects nowadays, that's a very deterministic outlook. You can't go in and go, hello, I'm from the developed world, I'm going to make a map for you, but actually it's no use to you, we don't know how good it is, goodbye, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the air miles. It's a very deterministic way of looking at things, and it's quite wrong in a lot of respects. So I started to look at systems analysis, specifically work domain analysis. So the idea is you're understanding what the entire system is doing, not the specific processes in the system that comes out from it. So you're not saying, well, I want to make a map. You're asking, well, why? Why do you need this? What tools do you have available at a bottom end? And what is the system that you're trying to create? So that led me to this massive diagram. And basically, it starts up at the top of, why do we want a map? Well, we want provision of geographic information, and we want development and governance. Because that's pretty much what they want. And then when you drop down a level, you're asking, okay, how am I going to deliver those functional purposes? Well, potentially community cohesion, provision of services, urban planning, resilience. Okay, well, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to get, provision of data, I'm going to get some demographics and statistics, I'm going to get some urban planning. Well, I'm going to drop down even further, well, we're going to drive that through cartography and data capture, and then we're going to go to the physical objects in our system, which are mobile phones, GPS units, pens and paper. Because actually, this isn't an idealised world. We can't go in with Trimble GPS units and differential GPSs and we're going to do a full survey as the Ordnance Survey would do. We've got a very small amount of tools. So what tools are actually available in the countries that we're trying to map? Because we can only work with what we've got. It's no good to say, well, we'll go with all of this, because we can't afford it. So we've got to say, okay, well, we've got this, and how can we derive the top? So when you're starting down, just looking at this branch, we've got development governments, you come down, and I have the physical objects here. And that derives here in the middle level, which is sort of a ministerial level, where you're saying, okay, I want land tenure, what things do I actually need? So you end up really with sort of a cooking list and a recipe book of saying, well, I want this, what do I actually need? And what this leads us to do is give us a decomposition space. So we can say, okay, I've got my total system, I've got subsystems, and I've now got specific components. How can I take these artifacts and change them to figure out, well, what do I actually want and how can I get it? And then this was done by talking with people that had been actually doing the mapping, people working within the international organisations at the World Bank, but also people at a government level, and sort of saying, okay, what have you got, where are you at, and how can we derive this and drive it forward? So, because it's pretty much halfway through the PhD, I've still got a lot to go. I need to get past first base. I need to go all the way with cognitive work analysis, and that is an actual paper of a title, an actual title of the paper. I'm going to finish the analysis of Dar es Salaam. We mapped one ward. We're going out for 3 months to support the local government in mapping basically every road that's there, but also education facilities, water and sanitation, but actually go further with the work domain analysis. Do decision ladders, look at the activity templates, and that's hopefully going to resolve the fact of saying, well, if the data that we're getting out is good quality, that must mean that the process that we've got is good quality. And what does good quality mean? Well, it's supporting what we're trying to do, and that's being supported by tools as well that are actually being used on the ground, as opposed to saying, well, what should be done? Anyway, thank you very much.